Hello, viewers. Long time no see on the channel. I'm Matthew, of course, joined by my wonderful host and best friend.
Callum,
Hey, man, great to see you. Now, today, we're back with another mini review that might end up being a podcast. We've had a few of these where we end up thinking that, we talk about one movie for, what we think will be 10 minutes, and then it ends up being like an hour and a half or something. It's happened loads of times, and don't be surprised if it happens today. I've just seen by the title, it's a bit of a different film for us. For a change, we haven't done any of these in the franchise. It's of course the 007 films, with the latest James Bond one, No Time to Die. So I'll pass over to you, Callum, to explain what this film's about and how it relates to the previous Daniel Craig iterations as well. So yeah, off to you, man.
yeah, I mean, hopefully one day, we will cover, all the previous Bond films, not just the Daniel Craig ones. Although I think the Daniel Craig ones are probably the only ones where we'll enjoy ourselves, I think. I binge watched the first four of this franchise, in the week leading up to when we saw this film. It connects as essentially a direct sequel to both Casino Royale and Spectre, which is a curious choice because Spectre was, you know, pretty much critically binned, when it came out in 2015. There's leftover stories there, mostly regarding Madeline Swan, and then Vesper is, brought up again in this film, having originated in Casino Royale. Matthew, had you seen any of the Daniel Craig films?
I have seen most of Skyfall, hadn't seen it completely. So I was very much glad when he gave me sort of a brief sort of rendition of what has happened in the previous four films before this. That was very much needed. So thanks for that. Because
Yeah.
I think as if you're going into this, like I'm sure there will be a few people like me who haven't seen all of the previous four. This is kind of a film that it is taking the world by storm. It's done so well box office wise and critically. So I'd imagine there's going to be a few fresh faces to the franchise here. So I think there'll be a lot of people in that situation, and you probably would be a bit confused. I certainly was, and you'd sort of told me, what character links to this character, and what's going on. So, I was very glad of that. But that being said, I still loved it. Yeah, I mean, it's
Hmm.
confusing, but I loved it. That's great.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to go into much of anything, in the spoiler-free section because I think
Yeah, me as well.
this trailer, its marketing, they have some of the longest trailers I've ever seen, and I hadn't actually seen a trailer until after I saw the film because I was curious, how much does this reveal? And it reveals snippets of almost every major action
Yeah, it
sequence,
does.
but it reveals no plot. I'd say anything, almost everything worth talking about is going to spoil something about the film. So my spoiler-free notes are very limited.
I'm exactly the same. And it's funny thing you mentioned the trailers. I remember your dad had made a similar comment when he sort of said that, the trailers do so well to get every action scene in there and without giving too much away the general gist of the film. There is the odd action sequence that's maybe not in there. I can maybe think of two that aren't. But overall, I think the trailers did a great job. Like some of the best trailers in recent years, in my opinion. And to be fair, fans did get to see a lot of them, given that this film was pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. You know what I mean? So there was ample opportunity to market this film, and in a way, I do think that's probably helped it financially. Whereas the hype's been built up so much that people just can't wait to go see it, if you're a diehard James Bond fan or not. I was certainly
Mhm.
that way anyway. I was really blown away by the trailers. So I'm really looking forward to discussing the film. But just before we do hop in with our spoiler-free discussion, thank you very much everyone who supported us recently. I know we haven't been as active in the channel as we would have liked. A lot has sort of changed in our lives recently. I know we say that a lot, but when we take these sort of breaks, but we are trying to get the odd video out there. Every other day or every week. So we appreciate your patience, and thanks to all the new subscribers. Actually, it's nice to see when we take a break from the channel, people subscribe, which is always nice to see. So thank you so
And
much
then
for
we
that.
notice the immediate dip as soon as we make the return.
That's really worrying, guys. Literally, that thought, to be honest, Callum, that if we upload this No Time to Die review, like it just goes back down to whatever, and oh god, heartbreaking. But yeah, as if, in case you're a new subscriber, time codes, our email, and our iTunes link, all that's always in the description. And of course, leave your comments down below if you've seen No Time to Die. We'd love to hear, love to read them. So yeah, bro, if you want to open the floor then with your spoiler-free remarks, then
Yeah, as I said, I have 3 points. Is this the worst Bond villain? Hard to say. I've seen all the Daniel Craig films, so I sort of have 1/5 of the movies to go off of. And you're limited to Skyfall. But just to have a bit of a discussion, this villain is a weird creep with no development and uh, you know, very little motivation. And I would say that he's probably my least favorite of the Daniel Craig films. Dominic Green from Quantum of Solace is uh, it's a low point for the franchise, but I think he's a bad villain because he's entirely unnoteworthy. But I do think this character is noteworthy, but in all the wrong ways. He seems like he's trying to do his best impression of Silva from Skyfall, but it just comes across as just just horrible, really. And I don't think that it's Rami Malek's fault. I think a lot of the blame is being laid at his feet. I'd read an article by the Independent, I believe, and it was just entitled, "Can Rami Malek act?" And the the conclusion that it came to was, yeah, I mean, to a degree, but they were like, he's still shit in this, and in their opinion, shit in Bohemian Rhapsody. I haven't seen it, so I can't really comment. But did you care for the villain? And if you didn't, do you think it was Rami Malek's fault?
I think we're going to have an interesting perspective in this because on one hand, we've got you who's, a Daniel Craig Bond fan and who have seen all the films, and me who hasn't. So I think for me, just as a general, audience, sort of just a general sort of public viewer, I thought he was probably the weakest part of the film in terms of just what he has to work with. He doesn't have a huge amount. I think Rami Malek's pretty good. I think with what he has, he's pretty decent. It's just for me that the character comes off as very cliche. I can imagine this character being in every sort of every sort of spy film ever. He's that kind of sort of creep who has some sort of vendetta against one of the characters in the film and goes crazy. So it is very much a cliche role in that respect. I just thought it was very underwhelming. It's the one part of maybe the trailer. The trailer sort of in a similar way to Ultron and Avengers Age of Ultron, you get this sort of menacing figure there, and he's just not given a lot of screen time here to be as menacing as he is there. It's really underwhelming, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the James Bond films, the villains are meant to be, sinister, but charming and have some kind of gimmick. Whereas, the likes of, Mission Impossible or the Jason Bourne films are meant to be like,
Yeah.
The very earnest ones, where they have, someone with, an environmental perspective where they want like a vendetta. The Mission Impossible films, I think, are, their villains are very earnest, and I think the character would have had more place there than he does here, just because maybe my standards were too high. But I think for the last film, I just think the villain wasn't worthy of the rest of the film.
I don't think your standards are too high at all. I think because the film's quality is so good, when an aspect of the film isn't up to that quality, it's very noticeable. So, like the villain, for example, is probably the only part of the film where I wouldn't say that I would say just isn't fantastic. Pretty much every other aspect of the film I adored. I thought it was really, really strong. It's just for me, it's just a lack of just a lack of authenticity or creativity with the villain. I just didn't gravitate towards the character. And I know you're not supposed to gravitate towards the villains because they're murderers, but in a way, I think the character is just missing something. And it's surprising because I thought Rami Malek could have redeemed it through his charisma, but he just isn't given enough screen time to do that. So I think he fully could have done that if he's just given 20, 30 more minutes. It's just I guess maybe the runtime is already that long, so they just didn't want to take too much time.
Yeah, and weirdly enough, the runtime is exceptional, but I don't actually think that they waste any time with it. I think every minute is necessary. Normally I would be like, you could cut that scene, you could cut that scene. I don't really get much of that here. But with Rami Malek, I think the lack of screen time is a bit of a double-edged sword, because you're like, oh well, I have to experience this horrendous character for less of an amount of time, but also maybe with more time he would have been less insufferable as the character. I think the film, despite its faults with the villain, I think especially in regards to the stunts, I think the film looks exceptional. I think they're the best stunts since Skyfall.
I think the action sequences are phenomenal. And on the last point in regards to the runtime, I do get why the film maybe wouldn't want to focus on the villain so much, just because we were told this is Daniel Craig's last iteration of the character. This is going to change how we see James Bond. This is going to be a new chapter for the franchise. So I get why with this being such a special landmark film, they would really want to focus on James Bond, and they really do here. There's maybe only one or two scenes where Daniel Craig isn't in. You know, he's that vital to the film. It's just, for me, I think they maybe overdid that too much, where they just neglected the villain and focused too much on James Bond. So I think there is a balance to be struck there. It just wasn't met for me. But that being said, I have to agree with you. Action sequences amazing, really well paced actually for a 3 hour film. You know, usually with the films of this length, you would check your watch a few times. I very rarely caught myself doing that, if ever. I think it's really smooth, and the action sequences as well are of perfect length. You know, there's the odd action sequence where in a film where you'd wish it was you wish it was a bit shorter, you wish it was a bit longer. I think all of them here are fantastic, and they're all so different and unique with sort of different settings, you know. The trailer showcased that really well. So I mean, in regards to spoiler-free remarks, nothing else from me. I don't know if there's anything from yourself.
Yeah, for the sake of people who haven't seen it, and who sort of have a fairly consistent, similar taste to us, who would value my opinion. It'd be a limited number, but if I had to tier list the films, I would say Skyfall and Casino Royale, two very different films, but probably on par in quality. Then this film and Spectre, about on par, but with this one just edging it, I think. And then Quantum of Solace,
in the bin.
very, very, very deep down. I mean, there's obviously the considerations with Quantum of Solace. That it was written during the writer's strike. Daniel Craig was was making up lines on the day. You have to give it some leeway, but the villain is weak and the settings horrendous, and the Bond woman lacks development. But for a writer's strike film, it wasn't horrendous. But I'd say this film is sort of sitting around the third mark for me.
And I suppose on that note, mate, would it be a massive hit or piece of shit for you?
Well, the fact that I would say that this is just edging Spectre, and the fact that it's the third in quality out of 5, you would think that that's maybe disparaging, but it's just that the other ones set such a high bar. So I mean, this comes very close to meeting that, I think, with just the villain running hitting a bit short, and also the fact that I just think he has absolutely no chemistry with Madeline. But that's sort of an issue carried over from Spectre. It's not like they were going to get more chemistry, because I don't know whether it's the characters, the actors, but either way, for me, it doesn't work personally. But it is unquestionably a massive hit, and I think it's for the most part a worthy goodbye to Daniel Craig.
Yeah, I'd have to agree completely. I'm glad you sort of mentioned it in a tier list of the other ones, because it allows us to put in the title, how does it compare to the other ones, which is good. So yeah, I'd have to agree. I was really shocked by this film. I thought it's not these Bond films, obviously I haven't seen them all, so naturally they're not really my cup of tea, but I will definitely check out the other ones, because I think it's a really perfect send off to a character I barely even know. So if it's doing that right, it must have done something right. So I mean, yeah, action sequences amazing, performances great, funny in places as well. It's got that classic sort of Bond delivery that even if you haven't seen the films, you know the classic lines of shaken not stirred or whatever, the classic Bond tropes. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. Yeah, it's great.
From what I can tell, all the other Bonds are insufferable, though, aside from Roger Moore.
I'd like to do a tier list on all the Bonds. I think that would be a fun one. There's I'm sure they're all quite different as well. Different names, different ages. So yeah, man. If you want to just open the floor with your spoiler remarks, then.
So a character that I didn't want to mention because she is only in it for a brief stint, is Ana de Armas's Paloma.
Yeah.
She is by far my favorite part of the film, and I'd mentioned I would struggle to recognize things that could be cut from the film. Unfortunately, that is the part that could absolutely be cut from the film, because she doesn't even make a reappearance at any point in the other in the rest of the film. They could have just subverted it and said that he heard news of all of the Spectre agents being murdered in Cuba. He didn't actually need to be there. But I mean, I'm very glad that they didn't bring her back later in the film to be some kind of villain as a reveal, because I think that would have been cheap and obvious, and it would have deprived us of this just incredibly pure character. I think we see a lot of female characters in the Bond franchise, but obviously frequently they're romantic leads, or they're either, very, very likable or very capable, but, rarely both. We had both in this case with Nomi, the new 007, and with Paloma. So I mean, this film does a lot to improve on previous shortcomings in the franchise, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also helped by the fact that Daniel Craig and Ana de Armas have really good chemistry. Surprisingly, they're not necessarily
Mm,
two actors I would say blend together well, just
mm,
just because the different styles, different deliveries, and just different personalities and stuff as well. Obviously, if you're a fan of Knives Out, you'd recognize them
mhm.
both from there. I would love to see her more in a future spin-off or future movie in this. I know we'll probably get another question of what will they do with this franchise later on towards our conclusion, but right off the bat, she's definitely my favorite part of the film as well. And I mean, yeah, she's really funny too. She's got great line delivery. And you mentioned there Nomi, Lashana Lynch, I think it
Mhm.
plays her. She's also equally good. She actually doesn't get as much screen time as I thought she would have. With the marketing, you kind of get a suggestion that she is kind of the focal point of the film in certain regards, and there is glimpses at that with her being the new 007. But I think she's absolutely remarkable as well. I'm glad to see she's getting a bit more work. So yeah, I mean, nothing but positive things to say with it, with the new characters there. I think that's one of the strengths is that it balances sort of the existing characters in the previous films really well, with the new additions.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was going to be more of a baton passing, especially with,
Yeah, me as
you know,
well.
remember spoiler alerts, with the death of Bond. I think there could have been room to, do that a bit more heavy-handedly, with the door open, for her return as the, new 007 to take over the franchise. And we don't get that. And I'm not, I don't mind either way. I hope that if they do continue this franchise, that they freshen it up in some manner. I think a female James Bond, I'm very much in line with the comments that Daniel Craig has made. That there are women within the franchise, and James Bond. I would, I think retiring the character is a better idea, and coming up with a fantastic female spy. I think the female audiences deserve a fresh character.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the moniker of 007 is just as iconic, if not more iconic, than the name
Yeah.
James Bond for me. So I think what the film did, passing that torch over in that respect, was really, really clever, really smart. Um, one thing I wanted to ask you, it's not necessarily something that we would talk about in movies a lot. It's what one thing is very notorious with these films is the new song,
Hmm.
Skyfall or those kind of ones. I know Sam Smith had one for Spectre and Billie Eilish's one here. Billie Eilish's music, not for me personally. It's not something that I would ever listen to, but I can acknowledge she's very talented. I have to admit though, I listened to this a few times after the film, and it's very good. I thought it was very good, especially with that sort of opening credits. It's a remarkable visual and sort of audio masterpiece. Really, it's great. Well, that's how I felt anyway. How did you feel?
Yeah, I've never been a fan of Billie Eilish's music, but because of the pandemic, as you mentioned before, there have been several delays on this film. I think it's had one of the highest amounts of release dates of any film, before.
Yeah.
So did this film, this song came out ages ago. I think it came out sometime early 2020. So before I knew I would even want to see this film or have any interest in it, I had listened to the song and I was like, oh, I really don't want to say it, but it's good. I
Yeah, I
do
was
like
exactly the
this.
same. Yeah.
And I think it really works within the tone of the film. There are previous ones which I've liked lyrically, but maybe haven't quite matched up with the film. But this one, I think it does really work, and I think it's something that you need to talk about with every film. But I mean, I wonder when this trend started. Because I'm obviously aware of Goldfinger and Thunderball, and for films like that. But I'm wondering, back in like '62, like was there like a commissioned theme song for Doctor No? Like I have no idea.
Yeah, it's
I'm curious to
interesting.
learn.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's James Bond is so funny in the fact that there is just cinematic tropes that are so notorious with it. Like we're saying, the intros, the classic, there's one, isn't there, where like he sort of turns and like shoots a pistol into the sort of circle. Like
Hmm.
that's a classic sort of
Yeah,
trope
I
as
think
well.
that's Die Another Day.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think the character is just so iconic. And with that, you know, naturally talking about the songs for each film, and that's going to come up. I think for me, Adele's Skyfall is personally one of my favorites. I think Adele's just got such a powerful voice where that is just that when I think of that film, I just think of Adele as well, which is not something necessarily I would say with Billie Eilish's song, but I still say Billie Eilish's song is still, you know, fantastic. She's got a very unique sound, which I can see why she's so you know, revered and so well loved, you know. But
Yeah, I think you'll like Casino Royale's theme because it's Chris Cornell.
oh really? Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah.
So like I think it doesn't match up with the film as well as Skyfall does. Like when I watched Skyfall, I was like, wow, I was like taken back by how well it transitioned into it. So I mean, it's not as effective as Skyfall, but I think it may be my favorite
Hmm.
song lyrically.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that one out.
So this film, I mean, it's an odd comparison, but structurally and thematically, story wise, everything. This film is exceptionally similar to The Fate of the Furious, and the
Yes.
trajectory of the franchise in general has been very similar to the Fast and the Furious because you know Casino Royale is by far the least silly Bond, and then by the time you get to Spectre, they're like it's Blofeld, and there's all this craziness, and he has the gadgets, and he has the Aston Martin, and he's doing like Mr. Bean style like slapstick, and that sort of transitions over into this film. And if you watch The Fate of the Furious, it starts off with like Dominic and Letty, they're retired in this beautiful country, and then the past comes back to bite them, and then it's revealed that the Dom has this child from, I mean, spoilers for The Fate of the Furious, but it's like 4 years old. But it's revealed that he has this child, and it's just The Fate of the Furious. In the way that people sort of made direct comparisons between Skyfall and The Dark Knight. I would say this is very much. I mean, it's just The Fate of the Furious. Like I feel like I haven't heard anyone else say this, but it just is.
Do you prefer goofy Bond where it's like the over the top villains with the gadgets and stuff, or do you prefer sort of nitty gritty spy thriller Bond?
I like serious Daniel Craig, but with like I think his earnestness then uh opposed with a zanier villain with like a base, and he's a bit wacky. I think Bond needs the gadgets to distinguish himself from Jason Bourne, or from Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible. I think he needs the gadgets, and he needs the love interests, I guess, to distinguish himself as his own character within the spy genre. But I don't like the full silliness.
Yeah.
Kingsman is fully silly, but it's in the pursuit of parody. So I think if it was Daniel Craig doing silly stuff, I don't think that works.
Yeah, I think Daniel Craig, I always look at him and think as if like he's about to burst out laughing at points. He's like he just I don't know. I get that vibe from certain people. And he's definitely one of them where I'd imagine he's a lot of fun to work with on set and stuff like that. On that note, with the serious nitty gritty Bond, this one is very much akin to that. Like we're saying, there is a few good one liners in there. Q especially. He's a real bright spot here. Um, is it too serious for you? Does it take itself too seriously with this being the final sort of edition of Daniel Craig's time as 007, or is it kind of does it balance that well? Because I mean, I want to ask you because you've seen the previous Daniel Craig ones, so like does it fit in tonally with all of them? I obviously don't, so I'm curious to know.
It really doesn't fit in tonally. Casino Royale is very serious. It was made off the back of the Bourne films, so I mean it's very serious. It's just he doesn't have the gadgets. He's gone fully rogue. It's just very very serious. Then Quantum of Solace is more the same. It's essentially a direct sequel to Casino Royale, but uh it's not great. Then Skyfall is I think a big tonal departure. It approaches it's this very like sun-soaked kind of look. That I do think that the Fast and the Furious, the more recent Fast and the Furious films have. Where the first film's very gray, but then it's this sort of sun-soaked look by the time of Skyfall. Then Spectre kind of abandoned that aesthetic but kept the same tone, and then that's continued over here. So yeah, I do think it has a real tonal inconsistency, but I would rather it go from serious to silly than from silly to serious. Because I just think I think people do become sillier with time rather than the other way around. So I mean, it makes more sense to me.
Yeah, that's very interesting to know. Um, like I said, I definitely do want to check out the other Daniel Craig ones and maybe a few of the previous ones as well. For sure.
Yeah, I think you would like Skyfall the best. But I think most people who really care about James Bond, their favorite is probably Casino Royale. But I don't think I had as much fun with Casino Royale as I did with Skyfall.
I mean, I gotta hand it to them. Those movies sound cool. Like you would want to watch a film called Casino Royale. It has a certain like, it just has that vibe to it, doesn't it? Like, you know what I mean?
Mm. But I mean, if you don't know how to play poker, it is just watching men for like 40 minutes play poker,
See,
like silently.
I watch True Geordie play poker every week, and I have no idea what he's doing, but I just watch it anyway. So I kind of think maybe poker is something to get into. I don't know. It's very interesting, isn't it? Like that whole sort of poker face, are you bluffing or not? I'd be very interested to see what it's like in person,
Mm. Yeah, I think this film is a victim of, uh, you know, when characters make like sweeping statements and you're like, really? There's one moment where I sort of rolled my eyes, where Bond catches up to Ash, who had betrayed and killed Felix, and Felix, for reference, he appeared in like 3 scenes in Casino Royale, and he appeared in like 3 scenes in Quantum of Solace. He's probably had a combination of 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes of screen time. And then, when Bond goes to kill Ash, he says, I had a brother. His name was Felix Leiter, and you killed him. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
I was sort of really taken aback because, they've sort of, they've used the legacy of their connection from previous films and from the books, but implied that history has occurred on screen in this
Yeah,
iteration of the franchise,
that's very
which is just
interesting.
not the case. So it just feels ridiculous.
Yeah, I was curious to see if that character had appeared in a previous Daniel
Yeah, I
Craig
mean,
film.
you were probably thinking that in that moment, this guy's been like a main character in every single
That's
film.
what I was sort of think. That's the vibe I was getting, but you've told you. I mean, clearly it isn't. That's not what's happened at all. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I think one thing you definitely right on is, or you're making an allusion to as well, is that there is a lot of sort of scene ending lines in this. That it's kind of like Transformers esque, where like this government official or this spy will say a really like cool line, and then it'll cut to the next scene. I just found it quite noticeable. But that being said, I think the script's really good. Like you know what I mean. Like it's not like atrociously bad or anything. Like, it's still excellent. And I was wondering. We'd sort of clarified it as soon as we got to the cinema about Danny Boyle not directing this one. Um,
Yeah.
because I remember either this was like the 25th Bond film or it was like the anniversary
Hmm.
of something. I'm not too sure. I'm not a huge Bond fan, so apologies about that for the viewers. But I was interested to see, was there a reason why, why there was a change in that or not? Because if I'm correct in saying he had directed a few of the previous ones, hadn't he?
So this is yeah, as you said, this the 25th Eon produced film. Danny Boyle was signed on to direct. It was his first one.
Oh, his first one? Okay.
Yeah, because Sam Mendes had directed the previous two, but apparently, things weren't exactly great on
Ah,
set between
yes.
him and Daniel Craig. Apparently on Spectre, because I think they must have had a bit of disagreement on where they wanted the film to go.
Hmm.
So he was sort of out as an option. And then Danny Boyle came in. I love Danny Boyle, so I was really excited when I heard that. I was like, oh, maybe I could get into James Bond. And then he just sort of walked away with no official explanation given. I think there were just creative differences. But he had brought on like his screenwriter that works with him on like all of his films. So I think it would have felt like a Danny Boyle film, whereas this film just feels like made by committee. Like a lot of big action films these days do. I think some of the dialogue works incredibly well, and the sequence with Ana de Armas I think is pretty much perfect. Especially her dialogue and her characterization. But I think the rest of the film, like there isn't a a distinguishable director's vision that I think you would have had with Danny Boyle.
I think that helps the film in some instances when it is trying to be this sort of um James Bond fan piece, where you've got
Mm.
loads of Easter eggs and loads of callbacks and stuff that a lot a classic Bond fan from the 60s right through to now I love. So I think in that instance it would definitely works well, but I definitely feel you're right in the sense that it does feel like it was made by a lot of James Bond fans and not
Mm.
necessarily a director. Like I couldn't really pick out a particular style here that I would say is akin to one particular filmmaker, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
every film has to have that, but it's just something that you said with Skyfall where it was quite sort of it had a certain look to it where you could tell, okay, that's a film made by this guy or this do you know what I mean? Whereas this film, it felt quite sort of, I don't know, not bland, but just quite safe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, with this film, unfortunately, when Danny Boyle walked, so did his script. So I feel like, any opportunity for something a bit different, sort of walked out the door with him. Because, by the end of Spectre, you don't really get a goodbye to James Bond, but it is, a complete, completion of all the storylines that were set up in the first three films. You get clarity as to, the source of Quantum, which was in turn Spectre, and you get a very poor but objective answer as to why all this has been happening, and it's because Blofeld's like a jealous little bitch. Like I don't really know. I watched all the films and I don't get it. He's like, my dad wanted to spend more time with you, so I killed him. I'm like, great.
Genius.
I'm glad
Yeah.
I watched four films to get to this. A lot of people have a lot of issues with Spectre, but I'd say that's sort of where my issues arise, and then I don't really I sort of quite like the rest of it. But yeah, with this film, I think the room to do something different sort of left when Danny Boyle did, and they were kind of like, this film was just made to be a goodbye to Daniel Craig. Like I think they went, it wasn't like, let's get a great story first and then confirm that we're doing something. It was, we've got Daniel Craig, we have to say goodbye to him. We want to make loads of money. Write a script that works.
Yeah.
And it works, but it's not meaningfully enough connected to the rest of the films to maybe be worthwhile making. It's worthwhile seeing, I think, because it is such a definitive end to this iteration of the character. And I mean, I suppose we have to say,
Do you want to hop in with that? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's the first time a James Bond has been killed in any of the films, and it's a bold move.
I really respect that, and it's something that, as I say, I've said it a lot here. I haven't watched any of the previous James Bonds, but one thing I will say is the character is that iconic where I think you could still get away with that. You can still feel the emotional levity of that, or rather the emotional sort of heartbreak of that. Sorry, it pulled on the heartstrings even for me. Daniel Craig, I really like him in this role. I think he's fantastic, and I was a little sad when they kill him off here. I really respected it though. That's a bold move, man. That's a bold move. What was your thoughts on it?
Well, stupidly, a couple days before the film, I had, I was watching one of the films, and I was like, I was making some notes on the previous films, in case we talk about them down the line. And I was like, hey, what branch of the government does he work for again? Is it MI5 or MI6? And I was like, I'll just look it up. And then I looked up, James Bond, Daniel Craig, went onto his character wiki, and then it just said Death 2020.
Oh,
Sorry, like Death 2021. And I was like, shit.
heartbreaking.
Because
Yeah.
I'd avoided the trailers even. I didn't want like a single spoiler for this film, just in case I did end up going to see it. And it just broke my heart. I mean, it's kind of obvious by the title. And this character, kind of has this iteration of the character, is constantly being betrayed, and he has a bit of a death wish. So I mean, it wasn't shocking, and it does work as a fitting end, for this take on the character, because he does just seem to never catch a break. But it just kind of sucked knowing it for sure going in.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to see what you feel about this, but I certainly felt that throughout the action scenes, you did get a sense of his morality in this. Like you got I got the thought that when he survives the that sort of the boat sinking or something, sort of halfway through, where Felix Leiter dies, you kind of get the sense of, oh, I just don't think he's going to survive this film. Like, he survived so much audacious shit in this film so far that nah, he's not making it out at the end for me. What was your thoughts on that? Obviously, with the title comes into it as well, and a lot of the trailers kind of lean into that. Is this, will he survive this kind of thing? Was it not shocking then for you?
Yeah, it wasn't shocking for me. Skyfall especially had, well, Casino Royale and Skyfall had, made taken great efforts to present to us that, this character could be hurt. He's a bit of, a like a brick wall kind of bulldozer kind of a character. But in Casino Royale, he gets poisoned and he has to restart his heart. And then in Skyfall, he was shot by Moneypenny and almost died accidentally by Moneypenny, not intentionally. But we've known from past films that he can be hurt, and then throughout the film, yeah, he's sort of just narrowly escaping these these near death scenarios. And yeah, I mean, in the end, it did happen, and I don't think I would have been surprised. I think I would have been sadder if I didn't know. I think it would have been, because I watched all these films in such quick succession. I really fell in love with the character, especially because there is this real stigma around James Bond in the current age in general. But Daniel Craig's version of the character is incredibly likable. He's not a perpetually gross creep or anything. So I do think you really do like the character, and I think it would have been like a a death of Logan situation for me if I hadn't known going in.
Yeah, I think this film handles it probably a lot better than Logan did, if I'm honest. Like, I certainly feel like in this film, the score by Hans Zimmer is incredible too. Like, the music swells in that moment, and it is really definitive, isn't it? Like, you just see him just explode. Really, well, you don't see him physically explode, but you get the idea. That's what happens, obviously. And yeah, I thought it was really really sad. It moved me as well, and I wasn't even a big particular Bond fan or anything like that. So I thought they handled it really, really nicely, really, really well. The movie doesn't become sort of too self-congratulatory either, which is it's something that I thought it might have done. It doesn't sort of give him a huge sort of funeral scene or anything like that. It is very sort of low key. The characters who knew him pay their respects by having a toast, and that's it. Like, the film ends, it's very definitive in that sense. I'm glad the film didn't waste time with any of the other shits. So I really can't give the film any more positive acclaim. Really, I thought the ending was something they absolutely got spot on, man.
Yeah, the fact he died, I'm pretty happy with. It works well in the film. I don't know how I feel about how he died. Because by that point, the villain is dead. He's doing it, out of nobility. The fact that he can never see his true love or his daughter again, or at least he can never physically interact with them. So I mean, I suppose he envisioned that life was no longer worth living because he couldn't be with them. But for him to just stand there and wait for death, like, I don't know if it fit the character. It definitely doesn't fit any other iteration of the character. It maybe fits Daniel Craig, but I think if you compare this Bond to, like, if you compare Casino Royale to this film, obviously there's a huge journey there, a huge character arc, but they're not the same person, and I suppose that's maybe good. I suppose that shows growth. But I think if you put these back to back, you're like, there's no chance he would have done that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because he loves his country so much. I feel like he would have sacrificed any. I mean, he constantly sacrifices his happiness, so I don't know that he would have sacrificed his life because he couldn't get his happiness. Because either way, no, he's not getting his happiness. But one way would be through never seeing them again. One way would be through death. I mean, again, it could be he didn't want to live his life knowing that they were out there and that he couldn't be with them. Fair enough.
I definitely think it's something that will split people either way. You're either going to really love that or hate it, and it will be Marmite in that sense. I think your point's definitely a fair one. I can see why that would be, a thought that a lot of people would have, especially if you've seen the previous ones and have a more of an emotional connection with the character. But with that, I just get I can't really give Daniel Craig enough credit for, strangely, for the main character film. He doesn't have a lot to say. He's quite like a one of the strong sort of silent types. I'd be curious to see in the previous films, is he always sort of, with it being a younger Bond every time in the previous ones, is he as chatty or not? He's really not chatty here. He has like the comedic one-liner, but he's not like cracking jokes during the action scenes or anything like that, which I like that. There's just no bullshit or anything like that. He's just, there to do a job, serve his country. That's what I really like about the character. Is he like that in every other film that you've seen?
No, because unlike the other Bonds, he does very little like undercover stuff. Normally you'd see the likes of Pierce Brosnan or whatever, pretending to be someone else to charm a woman or something.
Yeah.
And we see a level of that in Casino Royale, where he has to keep up the facade a little bit. But I'd say this the portrayal of how vocally is probably quite consistent.
Yeah, because he is quite a serious, earnest character, isn't he? Or at least Daniel Craig's rendition of him is. I don't have anything more to say in the film, Callum. I'm sure you have probably a bit more to say, so I'll chip in where I can in there.
Yeah, just a few points. Madeline, unfortunately, his chemistry with her inspector and this film really pales in comparison to his chemistry with Moneypenny in Skyfall. Like Moneypenny is essentially the only character he has ever had chemistry with that he hasn't had sex with. But their chemistry, especially in like the scene where she shaves him, which was sort of a very very well marketed scene at the time, is great. And I just think him and Madeline, especially Inspector, here because they have the added element of their daughter, I feel like that sort of connects them a bit more. But there's in Inspector, they know each other for maximum 2 days, and it ends with like her telling him that she loves him, and I'm like, when did this happen? Like it is crazy.
Is it a
like
Felix Leiter situation? Whereas like
if you watch it, they barely spend any time together. They hate each other, then they have sex, then 24 hours later she loves him, and I was just baffled.
That's how it works,
and here,
man. That's how it works.
her being the one that he's like, it's like, the one that he's willing to die for was just, I just couldn't get my head around it. I think it would have made more sense to me if the 5-year time jump had happened at the start of the film and they had been together 5 years at the beginning of the film, rather than it being presumably weeks after the end of Spectre, and then the 5-year turnaround being to have their daughter growing up to that age. I think so. I think we needed there to be history to their romance for him to be willing to risk it all for her.
That's fascinating, actually, because I think James Bond is one of those characters where he's never going to have that sort of one sort of female companion in his life. Like they're always going to like change, because similar to like Doctor Who's companions, actually, you never. It's very rare that you'd have a James Bond companion last more than a film, really, I would say. But yeah, I can see what you're saying. I think they have good chemistry, but I'd imagine, yeah, you're probably spot on. Like I'm sure he's had better chemistry with other female leads in the films.
He is absolutely the only James Bond that I can see settling down with someone. The end of the first film, he really trusts He really trusts Vesper. He quits MI6. He retires to be with her. He intends to spend the rest of his life with her. So he absolutely is the monogamous Bond. I just don't see Madeline specifically to be the one to do that for him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think probably a lot of people would agree with you on that one, actually.
Yeah, and we've talked about his death, obviously, but for it to be the responsibility, I mean, obviously there were a few steps in between, but we knew at the point that he was poisoned by the nanotech that he was gonna, or by the bioweapon that he was gonna sacrifice himself, for the sake of Madeline and Mathilde. But it just kind of sucks that the one to beat him was the worst villain of the franchise. It's just a bit sad that
buzzkill, literally.
A more capable or better developed villain wasn't the one to do it. I mean, the entire film isn't even about him. It's about him protecting Madeline and Mathilde. Like it's Safin doesn't even have a vendetta against James Bond. He doesn't even really have a place in the film other than in defense of his family.
Yeah.
So it was just maybe I need to see it again, and I'll respect the the, the bold choices a bit more. But at the moment, I'm really sour on Safin.
I think it's really interesting to see a lot of these spy thriller genres and films in that genre, sorry, sort of evolve. Back in the day it would have been sort of, the classic corrupt businessman, or you have to go undercover, those kind of things. It seems like a lot now in Mission Impossible and James Bond and whatever films like that. It is these biochemical weapons, or like the big sort of the big sort of villainous
They've run their course.
methods.
I'm sick
Yeah,
of it.
well, I was going to ask you about that. Like, it's something that you see a lot these days, where it's, well, this weapon is affect your DNA, or this weapon will poison you, or those
Yeah.
kind of things. Do you think it's kind of it seemed fresh not so long ago, but now I suppose it's kind of been that sort of cloth has been really wrung out, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if you can't do better than a bioweapon, don't bother writing a spy film. Like
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
fair point. Like, I think.
the MacGuffin, or the weapon used by the villain is important. Their motivation and their means of achieving that, I think, are both incredibly important. And here it's a bioweapon because he's a weird creep who's in love with Madeline, who he met as a little girl. Is that what it was? Like, I'm very confused.
Maybe a rewatch is
Because
needed. I don't know.
he kidnaps Madeline, and then he says to James Bond, like, everything they share in common, and he says it's like looking into a mirror, like we both love Madeline. And I'm like, what? Like, I was
Say
just
again. Say again, Stefan. I think I
everything he
misheard
said
you.
was like, excuse me. So that Safin was a big issue for me.
Okay,
But
that's fair. Yeah,
in
no, I agree.
regards to most of the bold choices they took in this film, namely his death, I did really respect it. But with this character, we see a lot of possibility for good things to happen to him, and then they're taken away from him. So I mean, quite honestly, the more unexpected thing for this version of James Bond would be to just have him catch a break and be a happy family man. It's bizarre. Casino Royale has a very weird structure of, like, not only just a Bond film but any film, because the main plot line is sort of 90% finished, like 2/3 3/4 in, and then the last of it is almost this like weird you know like romantic, like epic romance film where he's like on a yacht with Vesper and he's retiring from MI6, and then we find out that she betrayed him. But it's just, I'd written in my notes when I watched that, I would just like to see him actually end this franchise
Yeah,
just being
just catch a
happy,
break.
and happy and settled. And I think giving him a daughter was something really new and fresh. So I mean, I would have just liked to see him. I just wanted to see this character happy because
Yeah, I
I
really
really
respect
liked him by
that.
the end of it. So I don't mind that he died, but I think I would have been just as happy to just see him happy.
Yeah, I really respect that, man. I can see why. I think for me as well, I think the fact that the ending is so definitive, it's a breath of fresh air, in the sense that you can start out over new with something fresh and original. And I kind of like the way that doesn't leave the door open for a future if Daniel Craig wants to come back or anything like that. Like, it's so definitive, where I think the franchise probably needed that, in a sense. If you're going to have a spin-off, I think James Bond is a franchise that could work very well as like a mini series in Apple TV or something like that, those kind of things, or whatever, Netflix.
Team up Money Penny, Nomi, and Paloma. I would watch the shit out of that.
I definitely watch that as well. But on that regard, man, do you have anything else to say on the film?
One final comment, which I think is an important discussion. That there are obviously names thrown around for the next James Bond every time
Yeah,
the
we'll get into
franchise
that.
comes to a conclusion for the actor. Did you want to speak about that now or
Yeah, I
later?
like that. I like that. We'll get into that.
So there's always this question every time, and the names thrown around currently. Idris Elba actually made a comment, I think it was today or yesterday, where he said, "I'm not going to be James Bond." But he's always thrown around as a popular choice. Henry Cavill is always in for the for the fans. Reggae Jean Page from Bridgerton. I think he was sort of upped in the rankings by a lot of fans, and I quite like him. I think he would be a good choice. Or just bin it off. Why can't it be over? I think that this iteration of the franchise did something very different, where other films, told a story with James Bond in them, like the books do. The Daniel Craig franchise did something very different, where they told James Bond's story. They told his origins, they told his love story. They told his story of having a family and then his death. They told they told the story of a man, and I think he went from birth to death, and we saw all the important moments. And I just think, where do you go from here? It can't be better than that. So why bother? I think just because something's like an institution or can make someone a lot of money. I mean, I think reputation is a lot more important than money sometimes. And I think leaving it on a high note with arguably the definitive portrayal of the character is absolutely what they should do. I have no interest in seeing another Bond film with a different actor.
I have an interest in seeing a potential spin-off, like we're saying Moneypenny or Paloma or something like that. Or
Yeah.
just maybe I think a smart move would maybe just marketing it as 007. Just leave James Bond out of it for me. I think that as a 007, Lashana Lynch, I'd definitely like to see more of her. Like we're saying, Paloma and Moneypenny too. I think if you're gonna go for a reboot, maybe like 10 to 15 years down the line, which I have no doubt will happen. It's hard to sort of say now because like I said, I think it will be maybe a decade in the future where they try that. And obviously the actors today either will be too old to do that. Like, I doubt Idris Elba want to be James Bond when he's like in his 50s or mid 50s or whatever, you know what I mean? So which is fair enough, so like names like Michael Fassbender or Idris Elba probably won't be as commonly sort of hinted at compared to nowadays. So it's difficult for me to say. I think I don't know. There's not a name that really springs to my mind where I can. It's because Daniel Craig is just so definitive Bond for me, where it's so hard to. Maybe it's better just finding an actor who no one's heard of and just having him there. And maybe something. I imagine Daniel Craig was very well known before Bond, but I imagine he wasn't on the level of Idris Elba or Michael Fassbender. So it's very interesting to see where it'll go in the future. I'm kind of glad though that they're deciding to maybe bin it off. I'm kind of glad of that in a sense.
I mean, they're definitely not. But I just think Daniel Craig, he gave the most likable Bond portrayal.
Yeah.
He ended with the most different with the most different conclusion to the character than we've had before. Because every time the Bond leaves, it was kind of in flux. So I think this is really the first Bond with a proper goodbye. Because they absolutely knew that this would be his last. And I just think it's a real nice full stop on the franchise to have James Bond die. Because then the next time it's just gonna be like, yeah, and it's James Bond again. I mean, who cares? This is gonna make us $1 billion because it says James Bond, or because the character is James Bond. But I think if you're just embracing all of the sort of standard beats of a 21st century spy film, like they're just gonna blend into the Mission Impossible films, and there will be nothing left of it that makes it makes the fact that it's James Bond in it of any value.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. You don't want to blur the lines between other sort of spy genres too much because James Bond is so unique. It's so yeah, it's so inherently British. That's not necessarily a positive or negative. It's just objectively it is. You know what I mean? Naturally. So it's something where I think it's very much like, I think we mentioned this before. It's a Christmas film where Christmas Day, your family start running the TV. Oh, James Bond's on. We'll put that on, kind of thing. It's that iconic, similar to the Doctor Who or whatever, or maybe even Star Wars, something like that. So just to wrap up my thoughts, I thought this film was really, really, really good. Actually, really did surprise me. A really great emotional send off for Daniel Craig, and I don't want him to be one of those actors who has this big role and then is forgotten about by a lot of people. I really want him to have a great career. I think he will. Knives Out's getting a sequel. I'm sure that'll be a franchise with a couple of movies in it. So yeah, I hope he gets a lot more work.
Yeah, I think that this film was really strong for the most part. I think the biggest, sort of, issue that I had with it was, the story. I think the story was the beats of the story, or I really appreciate them. Him having a romance, having a family, having a villain that leads to his death. Like, I agree with all that, but then just when you actually fill in the details of that woman being Madeline and that villain being Lucifer Safin, I'm kind of like, that's where you lose me a little bit. But aside from that,
Yeah, fair
great.
enough.
I think we should leave the ratings to when we do like a massive tier list video.
Yeah, we'll have to do tier lists for Marvel movies, DC, Star Wars, every Fast and Furious, just every franchise we've done. I think there's a tier list video in there, for sure. Because especially because some of those reviews are 2 years old, 2.5 years old now. So yeah, we'll go back over them one time. But that wraps up another. This will be a podcast, I'd imagine. I don't know how long
I
we've been
reckon
going
it's
for.
been 40 minutes.
Do you reckon it's been? I reckon it might have been longer than 40. It could be
Oh
close
yeah,
to.
I just mean at a minimum.
Yeah. But good to record with you again, pal. It's been a while since we've done a video actually. So thanks very much, viewers, as well. Stay tuned to the channel too for we're going to be doing like a podcast and What If and Riverdale, and next week will be Venom 2, I guess. But obviously, if you're in the States, you've seen it. Unfortunately, we're not, so we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
So that'll be. I don't know. That might be a podcast.
Some spoilers dribble through, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking, did you want to review both of them or something, or just do one of those like a Candyman comparison or something, similar to that with the original Venom? Because it's been a while since I've actually went back and saw that. So I don't know if just your interest. I know I haven't said that.
Yeah, I have the notes on my phone anyway, so I don't even need to watch it again.
Yeah, well, we could do that, absolutely. So yeah, stay tuned, guys, in the channel for a lot of exciting content coming up too. So yeah, hope you guys are all well. Hope your family and friends are keeping safe and well too. Take care, everyone, and bye bye.
Bye bye.